Welcome to Just Sayin, the podcast that gives you an insider's view of the health issues that most affect our lives. Join my guests as we explore public health and personal and sexual health from the perspective of LGBTQ plus communities and allies. I'm your host, Dr. Bill Valenti. Coming up, Dr. Michael Mendoza, who leads the Monroe County Department of Public Health, for almost 3 years, has guided us through COVID.
Pandemics, I think, are inherently polarizing because they are predicated on a novel pathogen.
A few weeks ago, he made some time to talk with me about how he promotes wellness. In this 3-part series, Dr. Mendoza talks about promoting sexual health, how to manage pandemics and epidemics, and how people react in times of health crisis.
Other STIs have increased in prevalence in the same populations. Condom use is down.
Yeah.
And syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia are up. It's hard not to wonder if there's a connection there.
In this episode of Just Sayin with Dr. Mendoza, we talk about whether advances in HIV care have led people to let down their guard against other sexually transmitted infections. Just Sayin, I'm Dr. Bill Valenti.
We all kind of know, we all kind of feel this is a tough time. This is a polarized time. It's a time where people don't seem to agree. Stress is
The AIDS Remembrance Garden from 1985, at the height of the AIDS pandemic. And a group of community people got together and put this together, went through all of the approvals that were necessary to do something like this in a public park. And Leonard Urso did the sculpture behind us, a well-known Rochester sculptor and artist. And the idea was to commemorate and celebrate people. So I thought we should gather here because this is the ground zero for my pandemic experience, HIV.
Sure.
And you were doing HIV for a time. Tell us about that.
Well, I trained in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I trained at San Francisco General Hospital, which was the epicenter of HIV in many other ways. And I worked on the unit where so many of those patients were admitted. And, even now, when you go onto the wards, there are cases on the walls of origami, containing origami that was produced by AIDS patients. Pictures, it's a museum as much as it is a top-notch medical facility. And I did AIDS medicine while I was in training there. You couldn't not. Right. And it was at a time when HIV medicine was leaving, if you will, the ID specialty settings and moving into primary care. And so we took care of a lot of patients with AIDS and a lot of the inpatients with AIDS. But since then, HIV care has evolved so much. I don't do any HIV medicine anymore. I don't have any patients with HIV. Well, I do, but I don't manage their HIV.
Right.
But PrEP has become part of primary care squarely. So, as with everything in medicine, our scope and our skills have to evolve with the science.
But the ward in San Francisco was really the first AIDS unit anywhere, and we had discussions all over the place about should people be scattered around the hospital or should they be in a focus area. It seems like that worked and was needed for a long time.
Yeah, I mean there were a lot of we needed to put people in one area, particularly because the expertise was localized in that area, not as much because the patients needed to be isolated. And there was some community, from patient to patient, just knowing that you were surrounded, you weren't alone. There was that connection. But now I think HIV medicine, particularly in the hospital, there's no reason to give them a dedicated floor any more than any other medical illness. So.
You mentioned that HIV is a primary care issue and has evolved into almost a standard of care for people at risk. Well, the interesting part of that is that in those early days, we focused on HIV prevention, but it was really limited to behavioral change. There wasn't a biomedical piece to that. And now we have at least 2 drugs that are
proven.
Yeah. Used for PrEP and work.
Which doesn't undermine the importance of the behavioral part. And I will observe, and I don't know that this has been shown in a scientific way, but other STIs have increased in prevalence in the same populations. And I worry if it's because some of those behaviors have not been given the same attention. Condom use is down.
Yeah.
And syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia are up. It's hard not to wonder if there's a connection there. So that is something that we wonder about. And has PrEP allowed people to let their guard down about other things?
Well, there's a school of thought that there's this, disinhibition?
Right.
And that people become confident and less wary of HIV and do, in fact, let their guard down. Now, the other question that comes to mind, and something I'm asked a lot, and I'm glad I can finally ask you the question about STDs, STIs being higher per population in the Rochester area versus other places in New York State.
Yep.
And to be honest, I don't know the exact answer or the right answer to that. I suppose it's
That's the right answer.
Okay, it's many things.
Yes.
Because I've sort of couched it as, well, we do such a good job with screening people all the time that we pick up more infection. I want to get away from the discussion of, well, people in Rochester are less cautious or they have more sex. So
there is an element of detection bias, if you will. We do screen a lot. Whether we screen more than other counties, I don't think that explains it all. We have, as you know, extreme poverty in the city with the concurrent poor access to prevention, let alone any health care. I think that's a part of it too. We have sex workers who contract STIs at a higher rate. Do we have more than the average county? I don't think so. Seniors are not immune to syphilis and gonorrhea, and that is a significant proportion of our cases. And insofar as we might, I think we actually do have an older population because this area tends to attract, because of its services, older adults. There may be some component of that. So as you said, it's multifactorial, but the reality is, we've had 8 cases of congenital syphilis this year. And we've had 8, I think, in the last 6 years combined.
Okay.
And that's not trivial.
Not at all. And I like your answer about really trying to explain it rather than trying to zero in on one thing. So next time I'm asked that question, I'm going to say either call Dr. Mendoza, or, as Dr. Mendoza would say, it's multifactorial. There are many.
Indeed.
reasons. And I think that's probably true with most of
things.
Sexual health,
Yes.
certainly.
Which is what makes the field so interesting, because you can't just come up with one answer for anything. It's rich in that way because you have to think about the patient and their circumstances and their behaviors and their background and their trauma and their history.
That wraps up this episode of Just Sayin'. In the next episode, Dr. Mendoza talks about how pandemics are polarizing events because of the uncertainty and people's need to make sense of what they don't understand. Please join us for part 2, won't you? Just Sayin is a production of Dr. Bill Media, LLC in Rochester, New York. Special thanks to Dr. Michael Mendoza and his team at the Monroe County Department of Public Health. Brynn Capwell produced this show. Patti Singer is our health reporter. Video and audio captured by Matt Wittmeyer. I'm Dr. Bill Valenti. Until next time.